Welcome to the Deep Dive. We sift through the noise to bring you the important insights. Today, we're digging into the Lotusbee Market Digest from July 21st, 2025. Our goal, as always, is to get past just the headlines, really unpack what was actually moving the markets on Monday. Okay, let's get into it.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here is how these, daily numbers, these small moves, they often tell a much bigger story. They show these broader economic forces, maybe emerging trends. And today's digest, it's a perfect snapshot of that kind of story unfolding.
Absolutely. So looking at the big picture from the digest, it was, well, a bit of a mixed bag, really. The S&P 500, that's the big one, right? 500 large U.S. companies. It closed up, but only just 0.14%. But the NASDAQ Composite, the tech index, that really stole the show, up 0.38%, a record close for the NASDAQ.
That's right. But it certainly wasn't positive across the board. You had the Dow Jones, the 30 big industrial names, dipping just slightly, 0.04% down. And the Russell 2000, the small caps, actually down a bit more, 0.4%. Meanwhile, the VIX, the volatility index or fear gauge, it was sitting around 16.9. The digest calls that modest.
Modest. Okay, so not panic, but maybe holding pattern?
Exactly. It reflects a kind of calm, maybe some caution ahead of some big earnings reports coming up and, whatever the Fed might say next.
Right. So that's the overall mood. But what was actually driving things? What were the specifics?
Yeah.
The source mentions U.S. stock futures climbed partly because of ongoing trade optimism. Interesting, given the tariff talk and also pre-earnings enthusiasm. So it really seems like company earnings and trade news were the main focus, yeah, especially with the economic data being quiet.
Indeed. And you really see that when you look at the individual company moves. That's where the action was. What this day really highlighted, maybe more than the index levels, is how much the market's focused on specific company stories right now. Things like earnings potential or even just getting added to an index seem to be really powerful drivers for specific stocks.
Yeah, it's amazing how quick those shifts can be. So who are the big winners in the S&P 500 according to the digest?
Well, Verizon, VZ, ticker symbol, they rallied a solid 4.1%. That came after they raised their full-year forecast. Good news there. Then you had Cleveland-Cliffs, CLF. They surged, I get this, 12.4%.
Wow.
Yeah. On a better-than-expected loss, which sounds odd, but it was better than feared, and also strong steel demand they linked to tariffs. So there's that trade angle again. And Block SQ, that jumped 7.6%. Why? Because it got included in the S&P 500 index. Just being added gave it a big boost.
Okay, so forecast upgrades, tariff impacts, index inclusion, powerful stuff. What about the downside? Any big losers?
On the flip side, yeah, there was one standout loser in the S&P 500, Sarepta Therapeutics, SRPT. That stock got hit pretty hard, down 5.4%. The digest attributes that to FDA safety concerns related to Elevidys, one of their treatments. But beyond that, the report notes that declines were actually pretty limited.
Got it. And we also saw some familiar names really active, right, like Alphabet and Tesla. Heavily traded, it says, ahead of their earnings results later this week. And MicroStrategy, MSTR, was active too, following Bitcoin, apparently.
Yes, Bitcoin, which brings us very neatly to crypto. That whole space really took center stage in this digest.
It really did. Bitcoin, BTC, was holding steady around, $118,500, up about 0.5%. And the digest links this to Trump's signing of the Genius Act, which established U.S. stablecoin rules. So what exactly is this Genius Act? Why is that such a big deal for crypto?
Right, the Genius Act, GNIUS. It's basically landmark legislation. It finally sets out clear rules for stablecoins in the U.S. And that's huge because, well, regulatory clarity, or the lack of it, has been a massive factor for crypto for years. Getting clear rules is generally seen as a positive. And if you connect that to the bigger picture, you saw Ethereum, ETH, also getting a lift, up 1% to around $3,700. The digest puts that down to positive sentiment around regulation and ETF flows, so money coming into those crypto funds. And it wasn't just the coins. Crypto-related stocks, think Coinbase, Riot, MARA, they all rallied too. It signals, broader confidence in the sector now that there's some regulatory framework emerging.
Okay, that makes sense. Regulatory clarity boosting confidence. What about outside of stocks and crypto, bonds and commodities?
Yeah, they sort of played a supporting role, reinforcing the positive tone. The 10-year Treasury yield, a key benchmark, it eased back just slightly to about 4.37%. The digest says that reinforces resilience in the bond market. And oil and gold, they edged a bit higher too. Seems like the perception of economic strength was helping there. Copper was watched closely because of trade stuff, but it ended up pretty flat on the day.
All right, so let's try and bring this all together. The Lotusbee view in the digest was the kind of overarching message here. Sounds like optimism, maybe, but
Hmm.
cautious optimism.
That's a good way to put it. Precisely. The digest sums it up by saying markets stayed near record highs thanks to continued earnings momentum and a resilient U.S. consumer.
Mhm.
And we saw that, right, with companies like Verizon, Cleveland-Cliffs posting strong news.
Right. But the caution is definitely there, too. It highlights that tariff developments remain a dark cloud.
Hmm.
And those big earnings reports coming up, like for Alphabet and Tesla, they're going to be the real test of this rally's staying power.
Exactly. So you've got steady bonds, you've got some new clarity in crypto. The stage seems set for what the digest calls a selective theme-driven grind higher. Not necessarily everything going up, but specific areas doing well.
So, okay, what does this all mean for you listening? We've seen a market kind of balancing, right? Record highs and optimism from earnings, from crypto news, but also those uncertainties. The tariffs are still out there, and the full earnings season needs to play out.
Yeah, and it raises, I think, an important question. If the outlook is the selective theme-driven grind higher, as the source puts it, how much will individual company news, like we saw today, keep driving the overall market feel? And maybe more importantly for you, what new themes might pop up from this earnings season that are worth exploring further?
Something to think about. How these specific details of forecast change, a new law, a tariff mention, all weave together into that bigger economic story that's always unfolding.